2010. I've got to flash through these slides, but you all know Flash, okay? Created 1940, okay? Equal bond now, right? Year now is 2010. It's 70 years later. This is how he should look like. And he is going to need all that speed for other more important things. Okay. Somebody younger, maybe, will go for that. Mr. Fantastic, born 1961. Fast forward to 2010, it's 49 years later. He's a baby boomer, okay? But if he's not careful, without strength, his flexibility and reach are not going to help him very much. So how do we keep functionally fit throughout life? So let's start from the beginning, or rather let's start at the end, or with the end in mind. There are 4 possible ways to die, okay? And these trajectories were described in 2002. They actually relate function of about 8,000 people in the last 1 year before their deaths. And they found that sudden death claimed 7% of the decedents, cancer 22%, organ failure 16%, but the great majority of people, they had frailty when they died. Okay, the 4 Ds. Actually, there are 4 Ds you do not want to get. No, death is not one of them. None of us get out of this place alive. Okay, these are the 4 Ds you don't really want to have, right? Disease. A lot of people rather not have, cost money. They don't like to be admitted to hospital. They don't like to be sick. And when you're sick, you have difficulty. You become inconvenienced. You've got to take medicine, visit the doctor, adhere to a strict diet, okay? And then subsequently you get complications, yeah? And you may start to have disability. You then need to ask for help to do very essential tasks for an extended period of time. And when that help, becomes a permanent issue, you're actually dependent. And you may even need to go to a nursing home. And all this before death. A lot of us really would rather short circuit, right, from disease go straight over to death. Yeah. Only 7%, so difficult. Okay. So as they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's not always true. They say, what doesn't kill you only makes you older. Now this is statistically significant, by the way, okay? But what is more worrying is what doesn't kill you may make you a burden. And I think frailty, we realize, are basically some of the Ds that we have listed out, okay? So, how do we describe frailty? Okay? We are all built in with redundant structure and function, okay? And this excess capability of our body systems actually do us very well when we are stressed, when we fall sick, when we have an injury, okay? And it gives us a preclinical buffer before symptoms start to appear, all right? And consistently throughout all our organ systems, we had to lose about 70% of our function before symptoms of failure emerge. Okay? So 30% is the threshold where frailty and disability starts to show up. Okay? And below that, you will find that medical encounters, medical costs will then start to escalate. And below that, you also find that active life expectancy transits to inactive life expectancy. Right? So 30 is another important number to remember. But when we talk about frailty, actually the most relevant system in our body is the musculoskeletal system. globally we don't have a really good definition of frailty yet, but some identifiers of frailty are fatigue, impaired strength or weakness, reduced physical activity, slow gait, or weight loss. Okay, 4 of these criteria actually relate to muscle reserve, and we know that muscle strength declines by 15 to 20% per decade after the age of 50. So if we live until 90 years old, that's 4 decades, okay, we could actually be losing 60 to 80% of our muscle strength. That makes us dip right into the threshold for disability and frailty. Okay? So, muscle strength, if it's poor, so what? It doesn't mean anything if it does not translate to a reduction in function, right? So we need to measure function. So how do we measure function? Well, we got to break it up. Like, doctors like to make things a little bit more difficult, complex, so that we can fuzzy you up a little bit, yeah. But okay, we kind of make it at this stage now. So if we take the various levels where function can be sort of classified, you can get a few scenarios. For example, you can have a lady, 74 years old, with osteoarthritis of both hands. Okay, she has an impairment, a weak grip. Okay, poor finger flexion means she can't bend her fingers fully. Alright, so what can't she do? She can't grasp and rotate. Okay, fixed objects. So like me, cannot open jars, cannot open doors. Okay, so what does she do? She buys assistive aids for kitchen and makes special door levers as handles, right? Another example could be a 62-year-old man, advanced lung disease, okay? We use this term COPD, the doctors will understand. And he has what we call restricted lung capacity. He's not able to get enough oxygen to all his tissues in his body, and so he gets always tired. Just walking a short distance or climbing up the stairs, he becomes breathless, and finally he is forced to quit his job as a foreman. Okay? Or maybe, may not even be so clear, right? 94-year-old woman, just really old. Okay? Nothing specific. But she has a bit of sensory loss, everything is losing. Cannot hear so well, cannot see so well. The taste is down, the smell is down, okay? Bit forgetful, and starts to get a bit depressed. So, doesn't eat so much, starts losing weight, sits down at home most of the time, gets tired easily, and becomes progressively weak. And then over time, stops socializing, doesn't go out to meet her friends, right? And then one night, she dies alone at home. A lot of times we hear that in the newspapers, and we have neighborhood groups then rushing to answer, how come we missed this out? So, we look at that, then what do we want to measure? Usually, we ask them, right? A lot of doctors, we ask ADLs, activities of daily living, IADLs, instrumental activities of daily living. These are what we call self-reported measures. I ask you, you tell me, right? So, it actually reflects disability already, alright? And it is really very dependent on the patient's recall and therefore his bias. You couldn't ask any man, any person, okay, what is his disability, he will underestimate. You ask his daughter caregiver, she will overestimate. Always like that, okay? Alright? And then we also know that actually disability is a mismatch between demand and capability, alright? Which means that if the task environment is very demanding, very difficult, then you can't overcome that barrier with your capability. So for example, if it's very tight to open a jar, that demand is very high, therefore you're disabled. But if you change the type of cap, then I'm not disabled anymore. So in the case of this lady, right, she actually buys something to help her overcome her disability, so she's not disabled anymore. But her function functional limitation is still there. She still has a weak grip. She still has a disease. So when we ask about disability, we don't get the full picture, right? So of course, we want to measure something more proximal, more early, right? So we have what we call performance measures, okay, which are actually objective measures. They measure tasks that you cannot perform, all right? So they measure grip, they measure your strength, okay? Have to look and see whether I missed out anything. Okay, performance measures has one advantage, okay? They can actually capture the full range of function in non-disabled people, all right? And in people who are high functioning, you can still pick up problems, okay? And there are studies to show that they are predictive of incident disability. And that is actually very good news for us. So what has the committee recommended? Which measurement tools have found merit? Okay? The first one that we looked through and thought suitable for recommendation is this called Vulnerable Elder Survey 13, VES 13. It has 13 questions basically. It is a simple function-based tool for screening community-dwelling populations to identify older persons at risk for deterioration. And it takes into consideration 4 aspects: your age, self-rated health, limitations in physical function, and functional disabilities. It is a self-reported measure. And in designing this measure, the authors actually took into account it must be very simple, very few questions, okay? So that the person who's answering don't have to scratch their head so much. And how come I got to answer 50 questions, okay? Then it must have a simple scoring tool, okay? And so that it is easily adopted. Anyone, a busy GP or even a neighbor can just apply it and you'll be able to get some answers, okay? Although it's a self-reported measure, what is interesting about this survey is that it measures in section 3 functional limitations, okay? And what does it look like? Age, they divide them to less than 75, 75 to 84, more than 85. Self-rated health is basically, in general, compared to other people of your age, how would you say your health is, okay? And then, number 3, functional limitations, they look at stooping, crouching, kneeling, lifting, carrying objects as heavy as 10 pounds, which is about a medium-sized pack of rice, reaching, extending arms above shoulder level, writing, even fine movements, okay? Walking a quarter of a mile, this is American or Canadian, so quarter of a mile is if you walk out of here and walk out all the way to Outram Road, or if you walk from here to A&E SGH by the road, okay, that's a quarter of a mile, all right, 400 meters, and his heavy household. And how would you score, right? If you are between 75 to 84 years old, you score 1 point. If you're more than 85, you score 3 points. And then if your self-rated health is poor or fair, you score 1 point. And if you get any of the red responses in number 3, you get 1 point each to a maximum of 2. I will go through again a summary later. And in section 4, they look at disabilities in shopping, in managing money, walking across the room, light housework, bathing or showering. If you score a yes in any of this, it's very heavily weighted. This is disability we're talking about. You score 4 points. And so, for age, you can get a maximum of 3. Self-rated health, 1. Physical function, 2. Functional disability, 4. And the maximum possible score is 10. The higher you go, the worse you are. Alright? And they found that if you take the cutoff at 3, okay, you will identify 32% of the population who are vulnerable. Okay? And these people in the vulnerable group are 4 times more likely to have death or functional decline over the next 2 years when performance measure. Okay, this is a measure that you actually got to get them to perform for you. This test actually focuses on your lower limb function. Okay, and the authors of this battery of tests have proven that among non-disabled community-dwelling elder people, okay, objective measurement of the lower limb strength, okay, can actually identify older people in a preclinical stage of disability. That means even before the patient reports it, even before the doctor recognizes it, you can pick up people with disability. And these people, if you give intervention, you may prevent the onset of frank disability. So that is the beauty of this one. It is divided in three sections, one on balance, one on gait speed, how fast you walk, and one on lower limb strength. Okay? In the balance test, you have three, increasingly difficult. One is to stand with your feet side by side. Then if you can do that, you do a semi-tandem. Okay? And if you can do that, you do a full tandem, a heel to toe stand. Okay? And because it's in increasing difficulty, if you can't do any, you're out, go to the next one already. So, but if you can, you get more and more points. Maximum score is 4 points. Okay. The next one is what we call the gait speed. It is the time taken to walk 4 meters. 4 meters is about, for my stride, short, about 8 steps. So some of you maybe 6, 7 steps, and for people shorter than me, about 9 steps. Okay, right? And you get scores according to how long you take to walk. But having said that, these times, okay, all right, are actually US-based times. It is the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile of their performance. We don't have local data. We should get our own. Alright? And the third test is the time taken to perform 5 chair rises, okay, to an upright position with your arms across your chest. Okay? We usually do a pre-test first. If you can't even do one, then we don't proceed because you may fall down. Okay? And again, according to how much time you take, okay, you are scored. Again, these are US-based times. We also need to get our own standards. Yeah? And at the end of the 3 sets of tests, your maximum possible score is 12, alright, which is called your summary score. And they have actually tabulated scores against outcomes. If you have a score of 12, the best possible score, you are less likely to die in the next 4 years than a person who has a score of 11, than a person who has a score of 10, and so on and so on. Okay? And this applies to nursing home admissions as well. And this is accurate up to 4 to 6 years after you take this test. Alright? So no self-reported measure actually can give this what we call gradient risk compared to this SPP. That is the beauty of this test. Okay. Right. So why is it so important? Okay. We know it's important because the key to frailty is really muscle weakness. It is a strong predictor of disability, institutionalization, which is a proxy of dependence, death. And there is a large preclinical range before symptoms occur, so there is a big window of opportunity for intervention. And we know the intervention already, which is very simply physical exercise, is repeatedly given. I'm sure everybody has heard that many times in their life up to now. Okay, it's very cheap, it's effective, it's universally available, no significant side effects, it's doable. Okay, up to simply die peacefully. Okay, I'm told korori means cockroach. Because you know the cockroach turns upside down. Yeah. And it is not just an Oriental idea, okay? The Greeks had a different way of saying it. They wanted to